With
This
the session,
conference
guys.
will now be recorded.
Okay, before I get started with the session, anyone, any questions before I can get started? Yes, Pawan, you raise your hand. Please go ahead. Pawan, do you have a question? Vasant, do you have a question? Please go ahead. You can go ahead and
Yeah,
yeah.
actually, you showing your screen that one not coming well, tiny one.
I'm sorry.
I
I'm
want
sorry. Can you
to,
come? I'm sorry. Can you come
you
again,
you
please?
screen you screening no that one block our class block. I can't visible there.
Sorry, I didn't follow. I did not follow that. Can you please come again?
Okay, nothing. I got it. I got it. No.
Okay. Anyone else got a question, guys? Vasant, I see you also raise your hand. So any questions there?
Yes, sir. I have few questions
Good,
following the
please.
previous
Mhm.
session. The first
Good.
one is the user whom we invite has to
Okay.
enter the password of their Gmail or email ID, right?
Correct.
Cool. And the second one, I want to confirm my understanding. Deleting a
Okay.
user will delete him from the tenant ID, unlike just from a subscription.
Correct. Unlike just from a subscription, it will delete the user from the tenant. So if the user is not a part of the tenant, the user will not be able to access the subscription as well.
Cool. And two more questions, but they haven't been discussed in our chapter. But
Okay.
if time permits, you may answer them, and if you feel like they will be answered in forward sessions, you may skip them for now. So the questions
Sure.
are: what is service principle,
Mhm.
uh, which we usually see in user group or service principle, and
Correct.
the second
Correct.
one is
Hmm.
why and when do we select the group type as
Okay.
security or Microsoft 365?
Okay.
That is it.
Mhm. Okay. So to answer the first question, so if you go, let's say, into your subscription, and if you go in the subscription out here, go to the access control. If you say add the role assignment, and let's select some role out here, not adding something. There's something called user group. These both are something that we discussed, and there is
Correct.
something also called as service principle. So this is something Vasant was asking. So what exactly is service principle out here? What it gives you out here is that users and groups are for physical users, like you, like me, like a lot of developers. We come under the category of something called users. Now, apart from users, there are also called applications that want to use your, let's say, Azure account out here. Like, let's say, Azure Devops is an application. Azure Devops wants to use, let's say, something called your Azure subscription out here. If Azure DevOps and applications like Azure DevOps, they want to use your Azure subscriptions, they come under a broad category called service principle, which we will be looking at, but just giving an overview of what really this is. They come under a broad classification called as a service principle out here. And the next question is that groups out here, when you go and create something called as a group and say new group out here, there is something known as a security or Microsoft 365 out here. Normally, we went ahead and created something called security. So, very bare basic understanding of this is that if you create a Microsoft 365 group, there is something called enter the local email address as a part of this, meaning Microsoft 365, exactly Office 365 products that you let's say purchase will also come with some kind of a subscription, like Office and all these things. They come with some kind of a subscription, and also there is something called on-premise subscription, meaning this is Azure Active Directory, which is on the cloud. But earlier to it, there is something called Azure Active Directory on-premise, where you need to buy licensing and all these things. When you buy that, that comes under something called Microsoft 365 out here. So if you want, or if you already have a group, if you already have a local group out here, you can also go ahead and add them and import all that particular contacts into the cloud. This is what, let's say, the 365 group really means. But normally, when you create a new group, you create it as a security group on the cloud. So these are the two questions that you had, Vasant. Does that answer your question? And again, I'm
Yes, sir.
just giving you a very broad overview of these things. We'll go into them once the class comes into picture.
Sure, no problem. Thank you.
All right. Any more questions, guys? Anyone? Any more questions offline?
Yeah, Kiran.
Is it mandatory to have a credit card for a subscription? Yes, it is mandatory. Earlier, Azure used to also accept debits, but it is not, let's say, accepting that anymore. But optionally, you can try an ICICI debit card, an ICICI debit, which is of a type of Visa. You can try that out. I'm 90% sure that it wouldn't accept, but you can try, still go ahead. If it doesn't, you can go switch yourself to a credit card out here. Yes, someone online had a question. I'm sorry. Someone online had a question.
Yeah, if Hi Kiran.
Hmm.
I added my friends, four of them in this. Uh,
Okay.
you yesterday you told me that, right?
Hmm. Right.
Actually, if I am the owner now,
Okay.
if they are also have the chance to use all the services what they want.
Depends upon what kind of a role that you have given. Let's say if you have given a contributor and owner or an owner role. I mean, even if you give a
Mm.
contributor role, yes, they can access all the services that you have an access to. They can also do that, apart from
If,
adding another user.
okay. If they want to purchase another services like only owner can
They
do the purchase, right?
Yes,
Contributor also can do it.
it's the owner who needs to do that. Again, as an owner, you will again have to give your credit card information, CVV details, and all these things, and then purchase something out there. Meaning, if you want to upgrade something as a
Okay,
contributor, they cannot really do that.
okay, thank you.
Yes, someone offline had a question. Does someone offline have a question? Yes, any more questions, guys? Anyone, any more questions? All right, so just to recap a couple of things, this is where we are. We started out with something known as the Azure tenant. We said, how do you create something called as the Azure tenant out here? And the creation process of an Azure tenant is a pretty simple, straightforward procedure. You just need to go to a website called portal.azure.com, register yourself, and then you have something known as a tenant out here. So you'll just have a tenant which gives you something called as a tenant ID, directory ID, and all these things out. This is something that you get when you just go ahead and register yourself out there. But after a tenant, I am also telling that you need something called as a subscription in order to use Azure, for which there are multiple subscriptions on the offer like free trial, pay as you go, Visual Studio Enterprise, Azure for students, and etc. And one thing that we want is a free trial subscription, which is free for the first 30 days, gives you some. Guys, can you please not use your cell phones out here? You're disturbing the class. Someone who's using there. All right, so you have something known as the Azure subscription, and we go ahead and create something called as a free trial subscription out here. Free trial, free in nature. First 30 days, you would get somewhere around 14,500 in the form of credits. This is something that you do get out here. And after the free trial, you can go ahead, let's say, create a new free trial subscription using a new ID or upgrade it to a PSU and all these things out. And these are the two things that you need to go ahead, or these are the two things basically that you would need in order to go ahead and start using Azure. And for someone to use Azure, you also need one thing which is called RBAC, RBACs, role based access control. This is the third thing that I'm introducing, telling that something called as RBAC out here, called role based access control. So you need someone, or you need, if someone needs to access to your subscription, you need to add them either as an owner, contributor, or at least a reader, or different accesses out there. Or you can also go ahead and create your own custom role and also add them into that particular custom role out here. So this is where we are. This is the hierarchy what is following. And now in this hierarchy, I now want to add one more thing. Just a second. I now want to add one more thing in this particular hierarchy. Now we are creating a cloud, or we are creating, let's say, Azure portal in order to create different services. Like, let's say I said that there's a service called storage for storing data. There's a service called virtual machine. There are multiple services that Azure cloud offers out there for you. And before you create any service out here, you need to create a folder which holds all that particular services. It's just like you have a computer, you have a drive in your computer. Before you store some files inside it, you need a folder which, let's say, holds all your, let's say, videos, books, and all that stuff, right? That particular folder in a cloud is called as a resource group. This is how it looks like, called as a resource group out here. We call it as a resource group in Azure. So resource group, if you want to, let's say, go into the definition of let's say the resource group, it's nothing but a namespace which holds all your resources. That's it. That's the significance of, let's say, having a resource group out here. And for you to create a resource group, you A need to have a tenant, you B need to have a subscription, C you need to have a proper role, at least a contributor, and D is where you can go ahead and create something known as a resource group in the Azure portal. This is what you get, or this is how, let's say, the hierarchy kind of flows out. Now, under one tenant, you can go ahead and create multiple subscriptions. This is possible. We saw how this is possible. We saw something called as a multi-tenant mod or a multi-subscriber model out here. And under each and every subscription, you can go ahead and create multiple resource groups. Each and every subscription, you can have multiple resource groups out here. There is no limited number. You can have any number of resource groups as such, one for each and every team. Again, why do you need, let's say, multiple resource groups? Let's say I have multiple teams in my organization, like development team, QA team, production team, and all these things out. Each and every team can have its own resource group. So you can have multiple subscriptions under the same tenant. This is also possible. And under each and every subscription, you can have multiple resource groups. Each and every subscription, you can have multiple resource groups that can be created. So it now is like a tree structure. It's now like a branch structure. One tenant, under one tenant, you can have multiple subscriptions. Under each and every subscription, you can have multiple resource group. Under each and every resource group, you can have multiple resources like storages, like virtual machines, and all these things out, which we'll get into. But very firstly, how do you create a resource group? What are all the details that you need to create a resource group? Again, I'm just coming back to the home screen of my Azure portal, and coming into the home screen, I can search for something called as resource groups. As in when I type in RE, I'll get something known as resource groups. I can search for something like this, or I can click on these three, let's say, buttons out here. I can just scroll to something called as resource groups. This is something that I can do. Or I can just go ahead and click on this particular resource group out here, and I can have it created. Now, in my case, I already have two different resource groups out here. But in your case, when you click on this, you would see an empty structure here telling that go ahead, create a first resource group as such. And how do I create one? If I say create, it will ask me a couple of details out here, telling me what are the project details, meaning what is the subscription under which you want to go ahead and create this particular resource group. Again, under one tenant, I am telling you can have multiple subscriptions. So there is a drop down. You can select which subscription you want to go ahead and create this particular resource group under. I'm saying it is Visual Studio Enterprise subscription because this is the only subscription that I do have. Then I have something called as the name of the resource group, and I'll give the name something like first hyphen RG resource group. This is my first resource group that I'm going ahead and creating out. And there is something very important called as the region where you want to create this resource group out here. What does this really mean? Let's click on this drop down. There are multiple regions out here. Each and every region here represents a data center of Azure. Going back into our demo class, Microsoft bought multiple servers. They are placing all these servers into something known as a data center, and each and every region that you see here is nothing but a data center of its own. Something like East US, East US 2, South Central US, and all these things out. Multiple regions out here. If you just type in something like India, Central India, South India, West India, these are the three regions, or these are the three data centers that is currently in this particular, let's say, country called India. And if you, let's say, something like US, called East US, Central US, and etc. What really happens out here is that when you create a resource group in Azure, let's talk about the resource group out here. Let's see, where is the diagram. If you create a resource group in Azure, and then let's say you create a resource group in a location called East US 2, or East US, or India, or Central India, something like that. Let's say Central India. Microsoft goes in the background and goes to a data center called Central India. So data center, nothing but a big, very big room, a very big, let's say, facility where you have multiple servers out here. And in this particular data center, they will not be one, there'll be thousands of servers, physical machines. And on one of the servers, Microsoft is going to reserve a very small space and give you something called as a resource group on the cloud. So in the background is nothing but a very small space which goes by the name something known as the first RG that I'm creating. A very small space gets reserved for you, and Microsoft creates something called as a resource group on that particular data center out here. So I'll just go here. I will say something like India, Central India. I'll pick up this particular region called Central India out here, and I will say next. So in the first page, I am just giving the name of the subscription, the name of the resource group, and the location in which I am creating this particular resource group in. The location, like what is the data center and all these things out. After that, there is something called as tags, TAGS tags out here. Now, did you all hear this term anywhere called tag? Price tag, exactly. Identification, some meaning if you go for a shopping and if you want to identify a product, you'll first look at the price tag. Identify a product by a price tag out here. So a tag helps you in identification purpose. Then why do we need here something known as tags out here? Again, when I come down, I'm saying you can have literally thousands of resource groups, one for development team, the other for QA team, and you create thousands of resource groups out here. Now when someone comes in and asks me, or let's say my project manager comes to me and asks me that, can you identify which resource group is for a development team? It'll be very difficult for me to, let's say, identify from all that particular names, for which Microsoft lets you give something called as tags, key value pairs. Meaning I can say team, I can say value development. I can say something like owner. So I can have multiple tags out here. There's no limit. I can have multiple tags out here. And I'll say owner something like xyz@gmail.com. I can now have multiple tags out here, multiple key value pairs out here, using which you can identify things like who owns this particular resource group, which team is this particular resource group really created for, what do you get from this particular resource group, and a couple of things out here. And finally, I will say review and create. And on the review and create page, I will get details like what is the subscription under which I'm creating this out, what is the name of the resource group that I have, what is the region of Azure that I'm creating this particular resource group in, and what are the tags. It's telling tags is this one, team development owner is something like this, and I'll say create this out. And as and when I do that, I now have something called as the first RG. The same way, I can go ahead create something called as a second RG. Let's say the first RG is for a development team. Second RG, I can go ahead and create it for something called as a QA team out here. So I'll say second RG, and I'll say it is second RG out here. I'll say again, this is Central India. Central India. I can say a team, a QA. Owner is something like abc@gmail.com. And I'll say review and create. So this is again telling me this is second RG and all these things. I'll go ahead and create this out. And in a minute, I can go ahead and create my first RG and a second RG and all these things out. Now, how are tags identified? Now someone comes to you and tells you that, okay, fine, can you identify which resource group belongs to a team called development? Can you tell me? All I'll do is that I have something called add filter here. I'll say add filter. I'll say in the filter, I'll say the tag. Do you see something called tags out here? I'll say team is what? Development, and I'll say apply this out. So now I'll be only able to see all the resource groups that have a tag value called team is equal to development. This is how you can identify using these particular tags. Imagine if the tags weren't there, it'd be very difficult for you to, let's say, from that particular 1,000 resource groups that you create, let's say you create first, second, third, fourth, and you create 1,000 resource groups out here, each and everything for a team. Let's say for a development team, you have 500 resource groups out there. So the tags help you identify which team a particular resource group actually belongs to out here. So yes, any questions still here? I'll just disable this out. Mhm. Uh, it's not really adding into the filter. I have to take, yes, I mean automatically in this filter, yes, it's adding it out. Yes, yes, it's adding it here into the filter. In this one, so this is owned by a different owner called abc at the gmail.com. Uh, okay, in this place. Mm-hmm. Definitely, you can do anything there. You can have anything here. I'm just saying, yes, as Gmail account, you can have something like at the rate Microsoft.com, at the rate something. So I'm just giving an example of an email. In that place, you can have anything. Hmm. You can do that. You can do that. So even you can edit this tag also. So for example, if you want to edit this one out, first one is xyz at the rate gmail.com. The first one, not the same thing. So the first one, mhm, you can do that. You can do that. You can also give a separate name out here. So for example, if you want to, let's say xyz, no email, nothing in the team. Okay, let's go back into the team. And what is the name of the team that you want to put here? You still need some team out here. Again, ABC, XYZ, whatever it is. I put a development out here. Yes. Any questions? Any more questions here? Again, is the voice audible in the background? Is the voice coming properly? Okay. It's a bit
Yes.
disturbing. Yes.
Hi, Kiran.
Yes.
Hello.
Go ahead, please. Go ahead, please.
Only owner can add tax on like
No, even a
contributor
contributor
can
can
also.
add a tags. Yeah, yeah. Contributor can also add tags out there. Not only the owner, but also the contributor.
Okay, thank you.
Is any more questions,
Hi,
guys? Hmm?
what is the difference between the resource and what is the difference between the user?
What
Why
is
it
the
is
difference
useful?
between?
I mean, is it useful just to identify the difference between the teams, or what is the use of this?
Okay, just to again understand your question. So the question is, what is the difference between a resource group and a user? Is that your question?
Yes, yes, yes.
So same thing. You are a user. You are going ahead and creating a resource group out here. Resource group is a folder in the cloud. Just
Okay,
imagine that resource group is a space in the cloud that
okay,
will help you create multiple resources at a later point in time, like resources for storages and all these things out here.
okay. Sure, sure. Thank you.
Yes, any more questions, guys? Anyone, any more questions? Can one subscription? No. Good question. Can one subscription be on multiple tenants? No. Guys, can you please go on mute? So multiple, vice versa. No, it's a one-to-one relationship. It's always a one-to-one relationship. One subscription can only be under a one tenant. One tenant can, let's say, hold multiple subscriptions, yes, but it is a one-to-one, let's say, relationship. No, cannot. Yes, once, only one tenant. Yes. Is this okay now? Is the voice okay now? Is it okay now, guys? Say some adjustment that I need to do, but I'll do that. Not right now, but I can after this class. I can do that. What is the disturbance next?